Ugly God, a name that when you hear probably brings back a lot of memories of simpler times, and that's because during the time that this guy was really blowing up in the rap game, things were very different. But not only different, but a little bit more peaceful as well, because it seems like from the years of 2015 to around 2017 that hip hop for once wasn't really about violence, it wasn't about gang culture, and it wasn't about killing people. Instead, it was about having fun, making good music, and partying. And while we would unfortunately learn in a couple years' time that all that partying definitely had its downsides, for a moment in time, it really felt like hip hop was all about being colorful, having fun, making ignorant music, trolling on Instagram, and, well, doing drugs. And in that small pocket of time, there was many artists who were able to hop on the wave and blow up almost overnight. A lot of people do talk about Lil Pump as being one of the fastest blow-ups during that era, but I feel like Ugly God blew up even faster than that. With him going from your average run-of-the-mill college student in mid-2016 with maybe a handful of songs on SoundCloud, all the way to one of the biggest rappers in the game in mid-2017, getting on the front of the XXL freshman list, getting songs with millions of views, and, well, being talked about by basically everybody in the game. But despite all of that, his overall presence in the rap game has really seemed to fade as the years went on, which is pretty common for anybody that blew up during the SoundCloud era, but I feel like Ugly God has faded even more than most. I mean, at least every once in a while, at least a couple times a year, you'll see Little Pump and Smoke Perp pop up for something stupid that they did online, but Ugly God is basically completely MIA. So why is that? Is it just another case of a young, dumb, ignorant rapper blowing up with his music way too fast before then getting into drug use, becoming lazy, and eventually fading away because he's not satisfying his fans enough? Well, I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, and we're going to discuss all of that when we look into the story of Ugly God. Royce Cornell Davison Rodriguez was born September 19, 1996 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, although he wouldn't spend very long there. And this is because Ugly God's father had a job that meant that he had to move around quite a bit for work, although we don't know what this job is because Ugly God has been very private about his personal life, with us not even really being sure how many siblings that he has. He does for sure have one older sister that he has talked about publicly before, but besides that, we don't know if he's the youngest, we don't know if he's the middle, but overall it really doesn't change a whole lot, so let's continue on. After leaving Indiana when Ugly God was only 1 month old, the family would then move to Mississippi, where Ugly God would spend the first 4 years of his life. Now, of course, these years were pretty uneventful, as after all, from 1 to 4, you don't really do a whole lot besides poop your pants and, well, eat baby food. But one important thing that would happen during this time is that Ugly God would meet a friend that lived up the street going by the name of Brett, and Brett would teach him a very important life skill. Did Brett teach him how to do his taxes? Did Brett teach him how to fight off a bear? Did Brett teach him how to find love? No, none of the above. He actually taught him a much more important skill of how to catch lizards. And if you know anything about Ugly God's career, catching lizards would become a very big part of his career, which is kind of weird to say out loud, but either way, that's how he learned. But unfortunately, him and Brett's friendship wouldn't be long lasting, as soon after that, Ugly God would once again move and they would never see each other again. But some legends do say that Brett is still out there somewhere in Australia hunting bigger and bigger lizards by the day, and someday he might actually end up discovering a lizard that nobody's ever seen before, and when he does, he's definitely going to dedicate that to Ugly God. Okay, none of that shit actually happened besides him teaching Ugly God how to catch lizards, but either way, the family would once again relocate, this time to Cleveland, Ohio, where they would spend a couple years. And this is of course where Ugly God would first enroll in school, where he said that he was a pretty popular kid at the time, with him being funny and being able to catch the attention of other kids, although it's not super hard to be popular when you're like 5 years old. And this is also where he would start to find a lot of his early interest, for example, watching the Pokemon anime on TV, playing the first couple generations of Pokemon on his Game Boy, as well as playing Pokemon Snap on his N64. So yeah, the kid really liked Pokemon, but I mean, who didn't during the early 90s, or honestly mid 2000s? I mean, everybody basically likes Pokemon growing up, except for people who pretend that they don't. If you don't play Pokemon, you're lame as fuck. That's Ugly God approved as well. The family really only stayed in Cleveland, Ohio for a couple years before once again relocating, this time to Houston, Texas, where they would actually stick for quite a while from the ages of around 5 to 11, which meant that he spent a lot of his formative years there, with him even saying to this day that he's actually from Texas, which would make a lot of people mad in his future career, saying that he's not actually from there if he wasn't born there and didn't stay there his entire life. But I mean, he was moving around so so much, what do you want him to say? However, unfortunately, he wouldn't be able to stay there during his teenage years, with the family once again moving when he was 11 years old, this time to Louisiana, which they didn't really stick around that long, a couple years again, with them finally landing in Mississippi the summer before Ugly God was supposed to enroll in grade 8. And it was during this summer that Ugly God would meet his best friend Ronaldo, somebody who will become very important later on in this story, but for right now, the way that they met is through a couple mutual friends. Ronaldo was basically hanging out at his place with his parents not home, and he ended up inviting a couple people over. Ugly God ended up coming, and they basically made fun of him the entire time. They made fun of the way he dressed, they made fun of the way he looked, with him describing himself as being a black ass dude with pink ass lips, which apparently led a lot of people to call him ugly. And they even made fun of his ringtone, which should definitely be off limits. I mean, leave a man's ringtone alone. But either way, it didn't seem to get to Ugly God all that bad, and the two of them would form a friendship soon after that, with Ronaldo always having his back throughout the rest of his life. But unfortunately, being made fun of and getting bullied wouldn't be something that would stop there, because once he got into grade 8 and started playing basketball, it seemed like he became even less popular than he was before. And it's not even because he was bad at basketball, he was actually pretty good at it. It was more so the fact that he would try to be the class clown, which ended up pissing off a lot of his fellow students, as well as even pissing off the teachers, because in his own words, he was really good in school, but would also fuck around, which made them even more upset than they would have been if he was a bad student. Which I think is kind of dumb, because if you're getting your work done and you're doing well on it, I don't think the teacher should be pissed off at you, but I wasn't there. I don't know how annoying Ugly God was at the time, so maybe he was doing some crazy shit like taking a shit on his desk. If he was doing something like that, I understand why everybody was mad at him. And this man was actually so hated that he was booed at his own pep rally. I don't really know what the reason behind this was, but he describes a lot of his friends booing him, his own girlfriend at the time booing him, and even a couple teachers booing him, which is fucking crazy. That's the type of event that will turn any man into a supervillain, and after that all went down, Ugly God stopped trying to be funny, he stopped trying to get attention, he put his head down and tried to be like everybody else. Which unfortunately didn't really seem to work for him, because he was still getting bullied, with him even getting jumped one time when he was in grade 10, with basically everybody that he was with running away and not helping him, except for his buddy Ronaldo, so shout out to Ronaldo, he's definitely a real one. And this is the moment that Ugly God really became a villain. He was tired of being called ugly, he was tired of getting beat up, so he decided that he was going to create a YouTube channel around 2013 under the name of Pussy Bacon. And what was he going to do on that channel? He was going to get racist. Yeah, that's right. Apparently Ugly God actually got his start in the world of music by posting songs on his YouTube channel that had a lot of racist lyrics. Now, we can't find any of this. He has it all deleted, and probably for a good reason, so we don't really know the topic matter, but you could probably guess what type of shit it is. And all I'm really going to say about that is Ugly God beat Little Darky to the punch by about 2 years, so he definitely is the OG racist rapper, which we really got to give him props for. Okay, honestly, we don't. I mean, yeah, we probably shouldn't give him props for that shit. And let's be honest, Shane Dawson bodies all of them, so shout out to Shane Dawson. Okay, never mind, let's move on. After taking down all these songs, he would then go on to do skits on YouTube, which are now also removed and can't be found in any capacity, which honestly is probably for the best. We all did embarrassing skits on YouTube when we first started off. We all wanted to be like Smosh, and luckily for most of us, nobody will ever find those. So with the racist music not really working out for him and the skits not really working out, he instead decided to go back to the drawing board, and this time he decided to create a rap song going by the name of I Beat My Meat.
I'm jaking it. I'm jaking it.
Which pretty well sounds exactly how you would expect it to, and honestly it's pretty good for something that somebody created as a joke in 2013.
Bitch, I beat my meat. Give a fuck about what you think.
He says that he was heavily inspired by Lil B around the time. I'm not really sure if that's true, but either way, he ended up uploading the song. He ended up making his own homemade music video that he shot on an iPhone 4, which unfortunately is also now lost to history, and a couple people ended up checking it out. But unfortunately, one of the people who saw this song was his basketball coach, who told him that he should take it down if he wanted to have any hopes of getting into college basketball. So of course, Ugly God listened and ended up removing it. And surprisingly, there's actually another song from 2013 by Ugly God that goes by the name of Complete Nipple, which was posted on a SoundCloud by somebody named Little Henjin. There's not really a whole lot of information about this song of who a Little Henjin actually is, but I assume it was probably somebody that Ugly God went to high school with.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
As time went on, even with his music now deleted off of YouTube, Ugly God would still try to get more attention online by making a Twitter account, which also had the handle of Young Pussy Bacon. but after his parents noticed what he was doing, they asked him if he could change his name, so he decided to change it to Ugly God. And there's not really a whole lot of deep meaning behind this name. Basically, everybody would call him ugly. He felt like he was the ugliest man to ever live, so he called himself Ugly God. And now that he had changed his name, he decided to create a SoundCloud account in 2014 where he would once again re-upload Beat My Meat, but unfortunately, another basketball coach would notice that he uploaded it on there and once again asked him to take it down. This led Ugly God to try to be a little bit sneaky by creating a new SoundCloud account going by the name of Little Crawfish, which he hoped to upload music on completely anonymously, but after about a week, he decided that it wasn't really worth it and he decided to give up on music once again. However, once he graduated high school, he realized that he wasn't going to pursue a career in basketball and instead was going to go to college for computer science. So with a lot of free time on his hands and really nothing to lose, he once again hopped into music around mid-2016 where he would once again re-upload I Beat My Meat. However, this wasn't the thing that really got him a lot of attention online. Instead, it was a little known app going by the name of Vine, which many of you might know about and some of you might actually not. Basically, this was kind of like a proto TikTok where you could post 6-second videos of basically anything that you wanted. It was a little bit less cringe and a whole lot more autistic, and because of that, Ugly God fit perfectly. And what did he do on this app, you ask? Well, he basically caught lizards and put them on his nose, which seemed to be really funny to a certain audience because it started to pick up attention, and eventually people would even start to re-upload his vines and YouTube compilations that got millions of views. And because he was gaining all this attention on Vine, he would also start to gain a little bit of a following on Twitter and Instagram where he'd repost the videos to get them more views. And with all this newfound attention, he would try to get people to check out his music as well, and with SoundCloud not being too overcluttered at the time, quite a few people actually would go to check out I Beat My Meat, gaining it a couple thousand views. It really wasn't anything all that special and the song definitely didn't blow up overnight, but it did give Ugly God his first real taste of internet clout and he definitely liked it. During this time, he would start to release a handful of songs, with one of them being called Bernie Sanders, where basically he would mock the at the time presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. It wasn't really all that popular, but it definitely is kind of interesting.
All these niggas wanna trap now cause my wrist game Bernie Sanders.
He also had another song called Booty From a Distance, which he ended up uploading on SoundCloud and YouTube, but it's now deleted. He also has another song called FTBT, which I believe stands for Face, Tits, Butt, and Toes, I think. And because of that, a lot of people would start to think of Ugly God as a toe sucker, which is a reputation that he didn't mind having, although apparently he never really sucked toes, and that would make people kind of upset in the future. Come on, Ugly God, you can't be baiting these foot fetish motherfuckers. They definitely are more dedicated to their craft than anybody else. You gotta give them some respect. I'm sorry, toe people, you're not motherfuckers, you're toe fuckers, alright? I'll get that right. But none of these songs really mattered all that much, with them only getting a couple thousand views every time he posted. It was actually his very next song that went by the name of Water, which really got him attention online. Now, Ugly God claims the reason behind this song being so popular is because he ended up getting a pretty professionally shot music video for the track, which definitely does make sense. He actually didn't even pay any money for this music video, and it's pretty impressive. And because of that, the track would immediately run up to 1 million plays on SoundCloud before then gaining another million, and by September of that year, it'd be sitting at over 10 million. And because of the popularity of that song, all of his older songs would also start to gain views as well, with I Beat My Meat gaining over 1 million plays on SoundCloud in the following months. Yeah, that's right. That's all it was. He ended up putting out one song with a music video, catching a couple lizards, gaining a little bit of attention on Vine, and in one short year, he now had a song that had 10 million views on YouTube. And not only did it gain a lot of attention online, but it actually ended up hitting the Billboard Hot 100 at number 80, which is completely insane to think about considering the fact that he made this in his college dorm room, probably as a joke. And on top of that, the song's not even really that good. It's basically him repeating Water over and over again with a kind of little pump-like flow, but it seems like it was the perfect time at the perfect place because the song ended up going crazy and it's now even a platinum record.
I drip on your bitch like water. I splash on your bitch with the water.
It's crazy to think how fast this all happened. He basically dropped a handful of songs on SoundCloud, something that most artists really only get their start with, and then one of them happened to catch fire and immediately hit the Billboard. That's faster than Lil Pump, that's faster than Playboi Carti, that's faster than basically any SoundCloud rapper. So with all this newfound attention online, there was no time to waste, and he would immediately drop out of college to pursue all the new opportunities that were handed to him. With him immediately getting a chance to fly out to Chicago to perform at the first ever Summer Smash. Now keep in mind, this artist wasn't as big as it would soon become in the following years, but he was still able to get around some pretty big rappers like Lil Yachty, Warhol SS, and Famous Dex. And forming a connection with these guys was definitely a good idea because Warhol SS had already gained a lot of attention in LA, Lil Yachty was about to be massive, and Famous Dex basically already was huge. So creating music with all these guys was definitely a good idea and would ensure that Ugly God would have even more hits, at least in the underground, and he would immediately capitalize on that by getting Rich the Kid on the remix of Water. And at the time, Rich the Kid was another really big rapper, but because Ugly God knew Famous Dex, he was able to get this feature for completely free, which helped Water get even bigger than it already was. Soon after remixing that track, he would then hop on another song with an artist named Carnage called Rari, which had features from both him, Famous Dex, and Lil Yachty, so that was definitely a huge collab for 2016. And he wouldn't slow down after that either, with him immediately getting another feature from Famous Dex, as well as another artist named Trill Sammy on the track Let's Do It, which now sits at over 12 million views on Worldstar Hip Hop alone, and it's not even a music video, it's simple audio. After those couple tracks, he would then go to LA to perform at Ham at Everything alongside Famous Dex once again, with Little House Phone being the opener. And during the time that all of this was happening, he was also dropping a lot of music with an artist by the name of Wintertime. Now, I'm not really sure how the two of them met, and actually Wintertime is a very mysterious artist altogether, so maybe I'll do a video on him in the future, but either way, those songs were also doing numbers, and Ugly God was definitely rising fast. After the Ham on Everything show, he would immediately do a No Jumper interview, followed up by a DJ Vlad interview, and in this DJ Vlad interview, he would actually speak about XXXTentacion, who at the time wasn't really that big yet. I mean, he was definitely doing numbers in the Florida underground, but he hadn't blown up with Look at Me yet, so Ugly God definitely was one of the earliest people to hop on his wave. And soon after that interview, he would also sign a deal with a record label going by the name of Asylum, which is actually really big in Europe. They have Ed Sheeran on the roster, but in America, it was something new, and Ugly God was actually the very first artist that they signed. And this was a pretty solid deal as well. Basically, all it was a single deal for Water, as well as him having to give them one album, so that's pretty good considering the fact that Lil Pump signed a deal where he had to give 5 albums to his label, and if he didn't make them their money back, he would definitely have to pay. So signing a more low-key deal was definitely a good idea by Ugly God, and he would immediately get to work on said album. So there you have it. In only 12 short months, Ugly God went from somebody who basically had no attention online at all besides being a little bit popular on Vine, having a handful of songs on SoundCloud with most of them being joke and meme songs, to a Billboard charting artist who was able to perform alongside some of the biggest rappers in the underground scene at the time, as well as getting attention from Lyrical Lemonade, DJ Vlad, No Jumper, basically all the biggest media companies, and signing a pretty big deal which most likely got him a lot of money. That is a lot of rapid fame for somebody who at the time was only 18 years old, and at this point you can see that it was starting to get to him, with him talking about him getting a lot of hate online for pretty stupid things. It was mostly people complaining about how he didn't actually like toes. There was a little bit of a controversy where apparently he had a Chucky doll and he had it before Playboi Carti, but after Playboi Carti went on to use that for a cover art on SoundCloud, a lot of people thought that Ugly God was copying him. People also claim that he stole the name for Water from another artist going by the name of Young Gleesh, which, let's be honest, that's pretty stupid considering the fact that probably every rapper to ever live has a track named Water. If you're gonna be mad at Ugly God, you also gotta get mad at Ski Mask the Slump God for saying Water. He's gotta get sued by Young Gleesh. There was also a lot of people that were upset that he got a co-sign from I Love McConan, with them saying that he sold out way too early in his career and he was trying to get close to a bigger artist so he could leech off of his fame, as well as the average hate that basically every young rapper got at the time from old heads calling him a mumble rapper, which was a label that he definitely didn't like, with him saying that you could completely understand everything that he was saying in his music. However, despite that, I don't want to make it seem like everybody hated Ugly God. In fact, most people really liked him, with a lot of people describing him as one of the more intelligent SoundCloud rappers, considering the fact that he wasn't on drugs and he was actually pretty smart. But the thing is, when you get so much overwhelming attention online from such a massive audience, it's not long before you start to notice the negative, and Ugly God was definitely letting it get to him. But despite that little bit of negativity, 2017 would be an even bigger year for Ugly God than even 2016, with him immediately dropping the follow-up to Water going by the name of Bitch. This track was a pretty big success, getting 32 million plays on SoundCloud alone, although it didn't chart like Water, so it was a little bit disappointing, but he would immediately follow up that track with another called Fuck Ugly God, which was actually a diss track on himself, which now sits at over 16 million plays on SoundCloud. And I know you're noticing that the plays are going down and down with each new song that he put out, probably leading you to believe that he was starting to fall off after Water, but keep in mind, he was still pushing pushing over 10 million plays on everything he put out, which is better than some modern rappers, and that's only on SoundCloud alone. There's even more plays on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, and every other streaming service, so saying that he fell off at this point is definitely not accurate. But at this point, fans were starting to get tired of him only dropping a single every couple months, and they really wanted an entire project from him, which he teased all the way back on No Jumper in 2016, but waited a little bit longer to drop because apparently everybody was dropping mixtapes around that time. But despite the long wait, the fans were definitely still hungry for it, and Ugly God did debate whether or not he wanted to put it out because it definitely was a lot more meme-centric, and at this point in his career, he wanted to move away from that more funny style of rap. He was starting to fear that he might be boxed in as a meme rapper with people like D-Bangs and Lil Boom, and he wanted to be more than that. He actually wanted to be a serious rapper, not like a J. Cole type of rapper, but at least somebody like Lil Pump who's actually taken somewhat seriously in the rap game. So the Booty tapes were really meant to be the final farewell for that part of his career, with him finally leaving that persona behind, and when it came out, fans really seemed to enjoy it, although the numbers weren't really anything all that impressive. Even with the Wiz Khalifa feature, it only ended up pushing about 12K first week and debuting on the Billboard Hot 100 at number 27, which isn't terrible for a new artist, but I feel like people definitely expected a little bit more, especially considering the fact that he actually ended up making the XXL freshman list for 2017 alongside people like XXXTentacion, Playboi Carti, Made in Tokyo, and Anime. Sorry, I think his name is actually Amine. Does anyone actually remember him? But anyways, it doesn't matter. Ugly God ended up getting on the XXL freshman list, and that was basically the biggest moment of his entire career. I mean, he was definitely popular before, but at this point, he was massive. He was basically a mainstream artist, and when he put out that mixtape, a lot of people expected that it would do mainstream numbers, but unfortunately, it ended up underperforming. However, I really don't think that Ugly God was all that upset about it, because he really only looked at this mixtape as something for his core audience to keep them satisfied, and the actual album wouldn't come out until a little bit later on, and once it did, that's when he would really break his way into the mainstream. But as you can see, this is kind of the problem with Ugly God. He was gaining way too much fame way too fast, and he didn't really have enough time to catch up, build a catalog for people to listen to, and he was basically forced to put out singles constantly to keep people interested. If not, he might lose his fame. And with him constantly entertaining online as well, it would start to get exhausting for him, and by the end of 2017, it seems like he was super worn out. He would do a couple more things that year, like hopping on a remix of Wi-Fi's Funerals track, Where You At, as well as performing at Billboard Hot 100 Fest, but after that, he ended up taking a little bit of a hiatus away from the internet. A trend that would unfortunately become pretty common for Ugly God in the following years, and would eventually lead to quite a bit of damage to his career. However, despite him being a little bit inactive, it didn't mean that the internet forgot about him, because he would get quite a few react videos on the Cuffboy channel, with a lot of them getting over 1 million views, as well as him having his own dance group that would dance along to a lot of his songs and YouTube videos, with a couple of those videos actually sitting at over 10 million views. So Ugly God definitely still had a lot of attention online, and if he ended up dropping his album in early 2018, he probably would be able to catch fire a second time, hit the Billboard, and do some great numbers. But unfortunately, it wouldn't be so simple, because he ended up teasing the album in January 2018, but wouldn't release it until August of 2019, which was definitely way too late. And 2018 definitely had to be the worst year for him to take a break, because after all, this is the year that basically all of those Instagram goofballs were popping off. You had Lil Pump going crazy, you had Boot Gang, Supreme Patty, Whoa Vicky, Bad Baby, and alongside all of these guys, Ugly God would definitely be able to slot himself into the perfect position to really take over on Instagram as a comedian, with him also getting more attention on his music. But when all of that happened, Ugly God was basically silent. He would continue to tease the album in February, actually putting out a trailer on his Instagram, with fans getting super hyped up because apparently both XXXTentacion and Ski Mask Slump God were going to appear on the project. He would then follow that up by dropping another single with PNB Rock called I'm a Dog, which ended up doing pretty decent numbers on SoundCloud. But the bulk of the attention that he was really getting at the time was for him hanging out with Tekashi 6ix9ine, who had recently blown up in October 2017, and by January of 2018, he was a massive star. He ended up performing alongside Tekashi a couple times, and he was even part of a viral moment where him and 6ix9ine were at the mall together, and a random fan ended up approaching them and trying to talk shit to their face, leading 6ix9ine to choke him out and almost get a lawsuit, with Ugly God actually taking to 6ix9ine's defense, saying that if he didn't beat the kid up, then he wouldn't look tough, which I don't really know if that's true or not. I feel like fighting a fan is never a good idea, but either way, Ugly God was getting talked about, maybe not for the best reasons, but being talked about online in any capacity definitely helps your career out. After that, he got into a random beef with XXXTentacion, where he went on Instagram Live and begged X to not summon a demon on him. I think he was mostly making fun fun of him. X can't summon demons. I know a lot of the New Age fans think that he was actually the devil on Earth or something like that, but he was just a random edgy teenager. Ugly God would claim that the two of them ended up squashing this beef before X passed away, but he did also say that he actually ended up completely trashing the song with both X and Ski during this time, so it seems like he might have been a little bit more upset than he let on. After that, he would continue to drop some music throughout the year, like a single called Leave a Tip, which really didn't get all that much attention, and the plays on it weren't as high as his previous work, as well as appearing on Comethazine's first project called Bosky on the track Let It Eat. So at this point, the numbers were definitely starting to drop off at least a little bit, and I think a lot of his fans were pretty upset that he hadn't dropped the album yet, but he would impress all of them in the summer of 2018 when he ended up dropping his second big hit, Boom, featuring Lil Yachty. This track ended up doing numbers on YouTube and actually got him back on the Billboard as well, with the track peaking at number 88, and a lot of people really described it as the song of the summer during that time, although there was another big event that took place that summer that would change everything. And that's the unfortunate passing of XXXTentacion, where he was robbed in broad daylight and unfortunately passed away in his own home state. And I know that that sounds random to mention. I mean, after all, he wasn't really that close to X, so it shouldn't have got to him that bad, but I really do feel like it affected him in a pretty big way, but probably not the way that you expect. Keep in mind, Ugly God is mostly a character. I mean, he definitely is a funny guy, he definitely does kind of act like that, but at the same time, he's playing it up for the internet. The real Ugly God, the real guy behind the persona, is a pretty normal dude. He just so happened to find himself in this crazy world of underground hip-hop, and once he got in, he completely ran off with it. But at the same time, I don't think the guy was willing to die over his music. And I feel like the death of XXXTentacion really was a wake-up call for basically everybody in the SoundCloud community, because before this point, rappers definitely had died in shootings, but mostly it was all gang related stuff. But for X, it was completely different because he wasn't gang affiliated. He wasn't on the internet every day talking about people and telling people to run up on him if they had a problem. Instead, he was simply killed because he had money and fame, and people wanted to take that money away from him, and they wanted the attention that would come from killing a famous rapper. And after that, it pretty well felt like the fun was completely over. I mean, like I said in the start of the video, basically the SoundCloud wave was built off of making fun music, doing drugs, partying. It wasn't about violence. But after Pete passed away from an overdose, doing drugs didn't really seem like all that much fun anymore, and now that X had passed away by being famous didn't really seem that much fun anymore. I mean, all these guys were always talking shit online, but it really didn't feel like an in real life thing. They were beefing for the internet, they were entertaining fans, but now everything felt so much more real. And at this point, I think Ugly God decided to take himself away from the internet for a good long while because he didn't want to be a target. And you can even see a video of him driving around in a Jeep only a month after X passed away, where a couple fans pull up on him and ask him for an autograph, and he seems really freaked out, like he doesn't want to be there, which makes sense. I mean, X passed away, Little Skies actually got ran up on with a gun as well, and Ugly God probably felt like he was going to be next. So he took a pretty long hiatus off of the internet. Unlike the one in 2017, which was really only a couple months long, this one was about half a year and led all the way into 2019. But it wasn't like Ugly God was sitting around completely depressed, because he would actually start to focus on his own mental health as well as physical health by starting to run every morning, eating good food, drinking more water, and eventually he ended up losing over 40 pounds. But with the internet being the internet, they weren't happy for him and instead made up a rumor that he was actually on coke, and that's the reason that he lost so much weight. So yeah, nobody was really happy to see him do better for himself. Really sad. However, even with the internet making fun of him, Ugly God couldn't stay away forever, and he ended up returning in March of 2019, dropping the lead single off of his debut album, going by the name of Hello and featuring Lil Pump. And considering how long of a break that he took, the numbers on this were actually pretty impressive. I even remember listening to it at the time, not really being all that big of a fan of Ugly God, but this track definitely was pretty solid. After that track, he'd follow it up with the second single, Lost in the Sauce, which didn't actually have a feature, and apparently Ugly God was actually pretty upset about that because he felt like when he returned to the rap game, he would still be able to get big name features, but apparently with him taking so much time away, a lot of people forgot about him. I mean, back in 2016, things were a lot more simple when it came to the SoundCloud wave. All you really had to do was go to a show, perform alongside somebody, and then hit the studio later that night, and you could have a couple tracks featuring them. but now in 2019, with Lil Yachty and everybody being so much bigger, he now had to pay. And if you're paying somebody like Smoke Perp $50,000 for a feature, you're probably never gonna see a return on investment for that one, so at this point, it was better for Ugly God to go for a mostly solo project in hopes of getting his numbers back up and maybe getting him in the good graces of some of the bigger rappers at the time. That April, in attempts to drum up hype for the project, he ended up putting out a small EP called A Little Something Before the Album, which featured 4 tracks, but wasn't really anything all that special and didn't get him all that much attention. I mean, at this point, fans were tired of waiting. They wanted the actual album. They wanted the actual project. They wanted to see what a more serious, mature Ugly God would really look like. And they got exactly that in the summer of 2019 when he ended up dropping Bumps and Bruises, which didn't do that well. It ended up selling 14K first week, which is only slightly better than the Booty Tapes, and it came out 2 years later. On top of that, there was no feature from Ski Mask the Slump God or XXXTentacion, which the fans were really hyped to see, and the features that were on there weren't really that impressive either. He had Little Pump, like I said before, he had Takeoff, and he had Wintertime. Really nothing to get all that excited about. But despite that, even though he didn't have big features, how did the actual music sound? Did it impress his fan base? Well, not really. Unfortunately, with Ugly God stripping away all the funny lyrics, it basically left the project feeling pretty empty and hollow, because after all, it's not really like he has a whole lot of versatility or range when it comes to his rapping. If you take the funny away from Ugly God, you basically get any generic trap rapper, and that's basically what all of the reviews for the album said, not to mention all the old heads didn't really fuck with him anyways, so yeah, reviews weren't good, sales weren't good, and at this point, it felt like Ugly God had fully fallen off. But I mean, hey, at least the project did hit the Billboard Hot 100 at number 46, which is like 23 spots lower than his initial project, so yeah, all around, not a very good showing for Ugly God. But hey, it didn't matter, because at least he was finally out of his record deal, he had given them the album that he promised all those years back, and now he was a fully independent artist who could do whatever he wanted. So at this point you would think it'd be time for him to get to work, start dropping non-stop singles on Spotify and SoundCloud, start building up his base, start performing all over the country, maybe go on a tour, maybe see if you can find some smaller artists or maybe some fellow washed up SoundCloud rappers that'll hop on a song with you. I mean, that definitely could get attention. It wasn't like it was completely lost for Ugly God. During 2019, he still had the chance to make it big. And that was shown by the fact that he would go on DJ Vlad a second time, No Jumper a second time, and it seems like both of these interviews were still pretty popular. He still had a fan base. People still wanted to see him make music. But then he proceeded to not really drop anything new through the rest of 2019, only returning in early 2020 to drop a collaboration mixtape with another artist going by the name of Rizzo. And to be fair, one of the tracks off of this project went on to get a music video on Rizzo's channel, which now sits at over 500,000 plays on YouTube alone, which isn't too bad, but it definitely is a far cry from the level that Ugly God was at a couple years back. But even if his internet presence was starting to fade at this point, he still had a lot of in real life attention, with him performing at pretty big venues, and he probably could have continued to do that through the following years if it wasn't for the COVID pandemic. So yeah, unfortunately he could no longer perform, but I mean, whatever, he was locked inside, he still had a big Instagram page, everybody was paying attention to the online world. Now was the perfect time for him to really recapture that former spark. I mean, think about if he got a couple of his meme tracks on TikTok, got a couple people to dance to them, he could probably have another hit on his hands. He definitely could have came out of the pandemic an even bigger artist than he was when he went into it. But around this time, Ugly God would have his first child, meaning that most of his attention would have to be focused on him and not trying to do antics online, which honestly is a good thing to do, good for your personal life, but not so good for your career. The only real notable moment from 2020 was Ugly God actually getting into a fight in front of a hospital and getting arrested, as well as appearing on a feature with Casanova, which got a music video which did pretty well. But I'm not gonna lie to you, when DJ Academics ended up promoting that music video on his page, so many people in the comments were like, holy shit, that's Ugly God. I remember Ugly God. Whatever happened to Ugly God? So that was 5 years back, and already a lot of people considered him forgotten, so nowadays it's gotten a whole lot worse. 2021 was an even worse year for him because he actually ended up getting his Instagram page taken down, his YouTube page would get hacked with all of his music videos being deleted, and he even lost the rights to his name, with him now having to go by the name of 74 Fio because Ugly God was copyrighted by his manager. In 2022, he just straight up did nothing. I mean, I don't remember seeing anything to do with Ugly God throughout that entire year, and at this point, you would think that's the end of the story. Just another casualty of the SoundCloud wave, the 1985 effect. Ugly God only got popular off of his antics, and now that he wasn't really popping out online, his career died off. But that would all change in 2023, because something massively unexpected would happen when Ugly God actually ended up somebody. Yeah, that's right. This whole time, you guys didn't know Ugly God is actually a gangster. Okay, not really. Now, the circumstances around this event are a little bit confusing. We don't really know the true story because, after all, the family is saying one thing, and of course, Ugly God is saying another, although he's never really spoken about this publicly before. Basically, from what we know, Ronaldo, if you remember him, he's Ugly God's best friend from middle school, actually ended up following Ugly God throughout most of his career, always being with him when he was doing interviews. He even appeared on No Jumper alongside him. Well, it seems like the two of them must have gotten into a little bit of an altercation. For some reason, Ronaldo's father ended up going over to Ugly God's mother's house and apparently putting a gun in her face, and then he tried to leave, and that's when Ugly God ended up shooting him and killing him. That's the main story that we heard at the time, but soon after that, one of the family members of Ronaldo actually came out and said that Ugly God had entrapped him in the house and killed him on purpose, but nothing ever really came of it because apparently the cops thought that it was self-defense. The family continued to war against Ugly God, saying that he only got off because his uncle is actually a judge, but either way, the case was dropped, and Ugly God had earned himself a lot of attention online because of this.
Police cars out here. You look in the street, stay back a little bit. This is where they're saying that he was parked at, where he received 4 bullet wounds to his face. This house right here has a camera. I don't know if it was there at the time or not. This is where his car was, his foot hit the gas after he was parked here and ran into this man's vehicle at 10:06. At 10:06, you were trying to this way. At 10:06, Deborah Drive. This is where he hit the vehicle and ran into this driveway. After he was struck by the bullet, his foot hit the gas. Obviously, the car was crunk and in park. But if you make a circle for me, you see it's approximately 15 feet from 10:09. This is 10:09. Well, no, my footage won't. You can see this is 10:06. This is where his body was found. He was pronounced dead. They had 8 to 10 police cars out here. This man has been here for a very long time. He's never been questioned or anything. My brother died in his yard. This is his vehicle that he hit, and they're saying that they're doing a thorough investigation. According to Damon Reese, as you can see, his sign is still in the yard where the house is now vacated, where my brother was murdered at. That I don't know why they don't want to investigate. All of these neighbors been here for years. Many of them haven't even been spoken to. The police ruled this as a self-defense, and within hours, the young man was released. This video is an informative video. Thank you. Have a nice day.
With TMZ articles, people making YouTube videos, basically everybody was talking about Ugly God again after years of basically forgetting about him. With many fans actually considering him a lot more badass now that he had taken somebody's life, but don't get me wrong, this was not a gangster event. This was more of a stand your ground kind of Texas Southern thing that went on. It had nothing to do with being gangster. But either way, after that, he would post up with some money and a gun, which a lot of people thought was actually the gun that he the man with, and if that's the case, then that's completely crazy. He then went on to appear on DJ Academic's stream, where a lot of people thought that he might talk about the event, but instead he really only talked about computers and what type of software academics use to run his computer. After that, fans would really start to beg Ugly God to drop a follow-up project because a lot of people thought that this would be perfect promotion for him to be able to put out music, which he did eventually do, dropping a very small EP called Two Piece, which really didn't push the needle all that much. And then after that, he never really capitalized on it, which I don't understand why. I mean, after all, if it really was a legal self-defense case, I feel like you should take that attention and try to promote your music. But maybe Ugly God is too good of a guy for that, not really sure. Either way though, besides a bunch of YouTube videos being made about him in the following years, we really wouldn't get shit from Ugly God until 2025 when he actually ended up dropping a new project called Floaterism, which had 4 tracks. And surprisingly, this is actually one of the most impressive projects that he's dropped in his career because it has a feature from Lil Yachty as well as NBA Youngboy, which is crazy. NBA Youngboy never really does features with people, but he does one with Ugly God on a random project that nobody even knows came out. So who knows, maybe Ugly God is priming himself up for a comeback. Although, to be honest, at this point, it's 2025. I mean, this guy's main relevancy really took place from 2015 to 2018, so when you think about it, it's been almost a decade. And if he really wanted to be popular, I think he would have taken the chance in 2023 to really run off with all that promotion, drop a whole project, do some music music videos, make a bunch of money, but with him not doing that, it leads me to think that he really doesn't want to be popular online. I think Ugly God is really the type of guy who doesn't really want to have too much attention online. He wants to drop his music, he wants to make his money, be with his family, and stay private. He's not for all those antics and bullshit. I mean, after all, he's like 26, 27 years old at this point, so he's probably getting too old for that shit. If he came back right now and started trying to drop music again, I feel like he could get some attention with people saying, holy shit, Ugly God's back? I forgot about Ugly God. Oh, I remember Ugly God. But besides that, I'm not really sure what he could do to get himself popping again. I mean, after all, so much has changed in that last decade. All the people who grew up listening to Ugly God are probably in their mid-20s at this point. I mean, I listen to him and I'm like 23 years old, so I'm basically almost dead. The new kids don't really want to listen to watered down meme rap. They want that Miles, and meme rap is dead at this point anyways because people actually laugh at Adam Killa, so I mean, humor's dead. But anyways, yeah, Ugly God, I'm sorry, man. Your career seemed to be off to a good start, but with all those hiatuses, it definitely caused a lot of damage. But at the same time, I don't really blame him because it really takes a certain type of person to be constantly online, constantly getting into antics, constantly doing things to keep people's eyes on them, and the only people who can really do that nowadays are Twitch streamers. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe start streaming on Twitch, Ugly God. You never know. You could get a pretty solid fan base on there. But yeah, with that said, that is basically the entire story of Ugly God up to this date. I mean, you never know. Maybe after this video comes out, he might end up shooting another person. I'll never say never. I'll never completely count anybody out. But at this point, I think that his career is pretty well kaput, at least when it comes to rapping. But you never know. He could have a comeback. But what do you guys think? Are you guys still fans of Ugly God? Do you think that maybe he got an unfair chance in the rap game and that it really had nothing to do with his own choices and it was the internet that really repelled him away from being a big star? Let me know what you think and more in the comments below. Leave a knife emoji. Shout out to Knife Gang. Leave an egg emoji, I guess, if you stuck around to the end. Subscribe to the channel because I'm trying to get to 30K. If you don't do anything else, at least subscribe. Come on, man. Please help me out. Shout out to Mr. Ugly God, and I will see you in the next one. I think the next one might be D Savage, but we'll see.